Hello everyone, my name is Nana Spio-Garbrah and I'm so pleased to be joining you from Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire for this first edition of the Blueprint Conference, being hosted by the Jenniez School of African Interior Design. I'm really excited to be here, and just to give you a little more information about me, I'm the founder and creative director of an interior styling company called Blueprint Africa. And Blueprint Africa provides a wide variety of services. We do set design, we do visual merchandising, we also do photography and editorials, we do interior styling projects, but the request that we get the most has to be sourcing and procurement in Africa. How do we get products to hotels, to businesses, to retailers when they're sourcing from the continent? So today I'm here to speak to you about the art of sourcing in Africa, and specifically to share 3 critical questions that I want you to ask yourself if you're an interior design business owner to make sure that you are starting off on the right footing when you're doing your procurement. So let's get started. So the first critical question you want to ask yourself is, what is my procurement strategy? What's going to be my approach to sourcing product for my business? And there's 4 major ways that interior designers have been doing this throughout the years. And let's go through them and see how much they apply to your business and to our context in Africa. So the first option is through trade vendors. And unlike the US that has High Point Market or Europe that has Maison et Objet, trade shows are quite rare. I mean, there are a few in South Africa, there are a few in Northern Africa in countries like Tunisia or Morocco, but for most of the countries in Africa, this is not really prominent for design. Nigeria, however, is really doing well in this area with events like Made by Design and the IGF Expo. That being said, trade vendors, or the people who participate in trade shows normally, are a great way to source because they offer very steep and very deep discounts on the products to trade professionals, in other words, interior designers in the industry. So that means that you can get paid through your markup on those products when you have a client project. So trade shows are great if you can participate in them, and we definitely need more on the continent. The second way to procure product is through third-party agents, such as Blueprint Africa. So third-party agents represent brands, and they do a lot of the heavy lifting and the back office work for you. So they'll do the due diligence on the brand, they will present you brands that you may not be familiar with and explain their products to you. And in that context, they can be really helpful because they also deal with all of the nasty part of procurement, which is, delivery and clearance of products at shipping ports, purchasing orders and invoicing, all the things that kind of distract you from the creative side of your business. So there's a lot of interior designers that want to outsource these kinds of tasks to third parties like Blueprint Africa or others that exist on the continent. And in those cases, you definitely would have to share the markup on the products with them, but that is to compensate them for the fact that they're doing so much heavy lifting in terms of getting you the products for your project. So the third way that you can do procurement is through retail. And that's probably the way that most of us know because we often associate procurement with shopping, which really is only a very small part of the procurement industry as a whole. But retailers are great, especially if you have a quick turnaround project or if you're focusing more so on e-design, where you're just giving your client a list that they can go and fulfill on their own without any hassle. What I want to add to retail is that in Africa, we have to also kind of expand our thinking about retail. So yes, there are the iconic shops like Alara, and there are the international brands that may have distributors in our countries like Roche-Beaubois. But we also need to go to our local markets. So in Abidjan, for example, Trècheville is a treasure trove of design elements. You can get textiles, you can get hardware, you can get floor tile, you can get a lot of the materials that you need for your project without having to go to a quote-unquote traditional retailer. So I encourage you to also use or have a set strategy for discovering retailers. For example, when I was in Tunisia, I used to go every Saturday to a road called La Sucra, where I would find antiques, mom and pop shops, you know, that little crazy shop at the end of a long windy road that nobody would see from the main street. And that's where you can really find treasures. So don't be afraid to go into our hectic markets. Get comfortable discovering and make that part of your overall procurement journey. And the last way that you can procure is by vertically integrating your business. And what I mean about that is that you have one business that's the design business, and then you'll have a whole manufacturing business attached to that. And we've seen that in Lagos and in Nigeria a lot with companies like Viva Bella Designs and Urban Living Lagos, where they've hired carpenters, tradesmen in-house, and they are able to basically realize the designs that they put in their mood boards and gave to their clients as a proposal in-house. This requires probably a bit more initial investment in your business, but it's so rewarding because you become a price maker as opposed to a price taker. You are the one who is setting the price for your products, and it can be really lucrative. So those are the 4 ways that you can do procurement on the continent. So that is through trade vendors, through third-party agents like Blueprint Africa, or through retailers, or just integrating carpenters, tradesmen, welders, and other staff into your business. And usually interior designers will have some kind of combination of these, but usually one strategy is dominant over the other. So the second critical question you want to ask yourself when you're procuring is, who are you procuring for? Who's your target audience? Who is your ideal client? Because you want to make sure that you're procuring a curated selection, that you're building relationships with vendors in accordance and in alignment with your target client. So obviously the type of products that you might source for an Aliko Dangote are not going to be the same type of products that you're going to source for a client like Rihanna. So you want to make sure that you are being really careful to make sure that you categorize the different vendors you are approaching according to themes and according to price points, being high, medium, low. So for example, my style is very maximalist, very color-filled, and so I align with the aesthetic of brands like Eva Sonienke. But if you have a client who, for example, is more into an industrial look, you might want to go with an Usman Bai piece. Or if you have a client that's very minimalist or like rustic and warm woods, you might go with a brand like Ile Ila. Or you might go with Saba Studios outside of Nairobi, Kenya, because they align with Danish design and they're very minimalist and have clean lines in their furniture products. So just having that categorization is really important when it comes to your procurement strategy, because you don't want to waste a lot of time going outside of your niche, which won't be really necessary. And I think that it's also important to note that you want to make sure that you include that curated list of vendors in your mood boards, in your renderings, in your interior design planning, because you don't want to, well, the temptation nowadays is to do what? Is to go on Pinterest, to just Google search products and Google search visuals for your mood board that would align with your client. And then the client approves, and then you realize that you cannot find that piece anywhere locally. And even if you can import it from Australia or wherever else, it's gonna take more time, more cost, and be more laborious. So you wanna make sure that you're using the curated vendors that you selected beforehand and put those into your design rather than starting the other way around. And when I talk about also being sure about who your target audience is, that goes into the question of whether you're targeting residential versus hospitality clients, right? Because if you are somebody whose main clients are hotels or restaurants, then you need to source vendors that are able to replicate the exact same chair or the exact same product over multiple iterations. And you need to source a vendor where you're sure of quality and that standardization is there. Whereas if you're a residential interior designer, that's not so much a concern because you're looking for bespoke pieces which may only exist in 1 or 2 iterations. So it's really important for you to know what brands and what vendors associate well with your target audience and curate them appropriately. So last but not least, and probably the most important question you want to ask yourself when you're considering procurement is, how am I going to bill for this, right? So you want to think about how you're going to put in your billable hours for the research, for the installation, the delivery of your products to your client site, depending on which kind of procurement strategy you are adopting. And a few words of caution regarding that. You definitely want to make the research aspect of procurement, identifying vendors and which of vendors align with your aesthetic before you get a client. You do not want to put those research hours in your bill for a client project because these are things that you should have set up, you know, from the onset, from the beginning of your business as a foundational pillar. Those are not things that your client will necessarily want to be billed so many hours for, just for you to go around looking and doing Google searches and scouring, you know, all of Lagos for what they need. They're expecting you to present to them something that is executable, something that they can get relatively painlessly. So you definitely want to make sure that you're not billing hours for, you know, a scavenger hunt, that you're being strategic about what it is you're presenting to your client. When I first started my business, I really thought that I would make most of my money from the creative side, from the e-designs, from the mood boards, and from my intellectual property and my vision artistically, what I was bringing to the table. But what I realized is that a lot of clients, especially in Africa, they're not quite yet comfortable paying for design services. So whereby they have no problem paying for plumbing equipment, paying for floor tiles, paying for furniture, they're not as comfortable being charged for design services. They always feel like that's a negotiable aspect. So what I do in terms of trying to overcome that over time with my clients is I put the products first. So this is just a visual representation on your invoice. You want to put the products that you're sourcing and their costs first up front, and then even to the extent possible, present your design services as a percentage or a proportion of the shopping budget or the procurement budget. And this is just kind of a psychological way of making the client understand that all the underlying services that you provided were in fact related to the physical, tangible products that they're going to be enjoying in their home or in their office space or whatever space that you are designing. And I've just found that it just helps because, you know, clients are paying for the products. They're not paying so much for the process, at least in their mind. They're more excited about the furniture they're gonna have and visualizing what their space is gonna be like when it's transformed, but they're not so interested in the fact that you had to go 10 times to whatever vendor to find exactly what they needed. That being said, we all know that e-design and the mood boarding and all the planning stages of a project are kind of product price agnostic, meaning that it's gonna take you the same amount of time and the same amount of money to come up with an e-design or we'll come up with a mood board or design or rendering even if all the products in that project, are $10 versus $10,000. But even so, I definitely recommend presenting that part of the project as a percentage or proportion of the products, because it just makes the client feel better, at least in my experience. So to sum it all up, I think I want you to walk away from this with 3 key messages. The first one being that there are 4 ways to do procurement in Africa, and you need to be very clear about which strategy is the most dominant in your business, which one's gonna make you the most money, and which one you can fulfill realistically. And make sure you do all the upfront work and all the upfront research, and don't bring that into the pressure of a live project. You need to do that as a foundational pillar of your business, researching delivery times, minimum orders, how to get things into the country if you're going to be importing, etc. The second thing I want you to walk away with this, the second message I want you to walk away with is that you need to be in a niche. You need to pick an aesthetic, or you need to be known for something. So you need to be known for a specific look or specific design, and you need to curate your vendor repertoire according to that. And I think that will even make the right clients come to you because you're very structured in what it is you're doing. And thirdly, I want to say, always remember to make money. Procurement is very time consuming, especially in Africa, and you want to make sure that you are compensated accordingly. But you have to remember the psychology of the client, in that they're not so much interested in all the things that you have to do on the back end. They're more interested in seeing their dream home or their dream space come to fruition. So you have to remember that clients are paying not for the dream and not for the aspiration, but they're paying for what you can implement. So always make sure that you put, to the extent possible, the emphasis on the final product and not necessarily the cumbersome process that procurement in Africa can sometimes be. So with that, I'm gonna leave you to enjoy the rest of the Blueprint Conference. It's been such a pleasure, and I hope that we continue to have this conversation. You can get in touch with me on Twitter, on Instagram, at Blueprint Africa, or shoot me an email with your questions or your responses and reactions to this video at nana@blueprintafrica.com. So until then, enjoy, 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 and live out your design dreams. See you next time.